Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 24 of Somehow We Manage. Joining us today, another great guest, Mr. Len Elmore. Some of you may know him from his All-American basketball career at Maryland. Others of you may know him from his great broadcasting career with ESPN. He shares lots of great insights with us from his career, so don't go anywhere. You're not going to want to miss this. Len Elmore joining us now on Somehow We Manage. Mr. Elmore, how are you, sir?
Doing well today.
Yep, it's an honor to have you. Great to be talking to you. Hopefully, we'll get some good sports conversation going. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about. So, you serve as a co-chair for the Knight Commission, and I'd love to ask you, how do you feel that the recent rule changes in college athletics are affecting academics?
Well, I mean, the hope is that it would further support the education, health, safety, and success of student athletes. Sometimes you wonder if there's so much focus on things like NIL, et cetera, that it takes away from the pursuit of an education. We're already having issues and difficulties with people certainly, leaving school early. We're having difficulty with people in some instances remaining eligible. There's certainly a need for racial equity in college sports, particularly when it comes to graduation rates and closing the gaps between white student athletes and African-American student athletes particularly, but all student athletes of color who trail behind their white counterparts. And then, you look at the transfer portal, how long are people staying in school? Are in fact the transferring credits that are meaningful credits that, allow them to pursue a meaningful education. So there are a lot of issues there. I think we don't have enough input from the results yet to see if, in fact, they're having a wholly detrimental impact. But I suspect there's got to be some changes in order to really maximize that opportunity to pursue a meaningful education.
And so overall, do you feel that athletes are getting the better end of the deal as far as NIL goes and the transfer portal?
Well, I mean, look, the transfer portal is one thing. People make mistakes, and if you think that you made a mistake in the school that you've attended, fine. I think the combination of transfer portal and utilizing NIL money from collectives, I mean, it's so brazen right now that it has become pretty much pay for play. That schools either entice and sometimes even poach student athletes from one school to come to another based upon what they can get with NIL. And that's not in the spirit of what college athletes and what college athletics is all about. But it's a right that should have never been abrogated. Certainly, student athletes have the right to pursue their right of publicity and to be able to monetize, who they are. But when it comes to attending schools, pay for play is something that makes it no different than the professional ranks. And isn't that what attracts most of us to college sports? The fact that it isn't pro sports, that it is about young people who, certainly are pursuing things beyond just a paycheck. And I'm hopeful that, laying down some groundwork, putting up some guardrails with regard to NIL and such that prevent the concept of pay for play, or at least slow it down, is in the offing. Because right now we're headed towards a situation where it's pretty soon we're not going to be able to tell the difference between professional ranks and college ranks.
So I'd like to talk a bit about your playing career. So how would you compare the era of college basketball that you played in to today?
There are obviously a lot of differences. Athletes today seem to be more specialized. They're probably better athletes by way of evolution. When you look at the medical technology, you look at nutrition, you look at training opportunities and training improvements. I mean, these young people today, this is 2 generations removed, at least from when I played, and they're better prepared to play their particular sports, both physically and to a certain extent mentally. Although, again, with television, with NIL, et cetera, there are increased problems that could be categorized as mental health problems that we never had to worry about. But I do think from a standpoint of the game of basketball, while players today are far more athletically gifted, I would say, I still think that understanding the game, understanding that it's a team game, understanding the nuance and the intellect that needs to be applied in playing the game of basketball. I think there's a deficit there simply because, again, there's so much focus on the individual as opposed to team play.
So obviously you were a part of that classic 74 ACC final. Many consider it to be the greatest college basketball game ever played. What did it mean to you to play in a game of that magnitude?
At the time, it meant everything because we were the number 3 team in the nation playing the number 1 team in the nation. We had played 3 nights; they had only played 2 nights, and so we were at a disadvantage there. But if we didn't win, we don't get to go to the NCAA tournament. And obviously, if State didn't win, they didn't get to go. So it had everything focused upon that particular game, and the absurdity of the top 2 of the top 3 teams in the nation not going to the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, kind of dawned on the tournament selection folks the year after we lost. So we didn't get any benefit, but we take credit for the change.
So, and I'd like to talk about your pro career. So you were in the NBA when the ABA NBA merger happened. So what did that mean for the game of basketball?
I thought it was very important, simply because of the 2 distinct styles of play. I mean, the ABA game was wide open, had some pretty good athletes, stretched the floor because of the 3-point shot. And I think that, America was missing out on the number of great athletes in the ABA because they didn't have a national TV contract. And unfortunately, for those years, there are a lot of great players who never really got to be in the forefront of basketball. Now, once the merger occurred, you could recognize the following year on the All-Star team how many formerly ABA players are actually on the All-Star team, which kind of told you that there were some great players in that league. But with the meshing of styles, the opening of driving lanes allowed more athleticism, and there were great players who now were able to compete against each other. Unfortunately for me, I had come off a year. My second year, I averaged about 15 points, 10 rebounds, but during the merger year, I had injured my knee in training camp and really didn't get to play much in that first year of the merger, and was kind of limited for the rest of that career. But it was a pleasure and an honor to be able to play in the NBA against some of the great players.
As you look back on your basketball playing career, who were some of the toughest guys you remember having to play against?
Well, I mean, look, I was an undersized center at that time. So, you talk about the great players, whether it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the Moses Malones of the world, Bob Lanier. I could go on and on. Robert Parrish, people like that. Certainly, those were great players to match up with. That could provide problems. Artis Gilmore was a guy I played against in the ABA, and he came along and played in the NBA as well. These guys were, tremendous at the top of their careers during that particular time. And, I think we're dominant players. And if you're talking about overall, obviously, Larry Bird and Irvin Johnson, when they came along, late 70s, early 80s, so to speak, and were able to demonstrate what they meant to the game. I mean, we could go on and on as the great players that played during the particular time that I played, from 1974 to 76 in the ABA, and then from 76 until I retired in 84. Those are just a few of the terrific players that are now in the Hall of Fame. So, I don't know if we have enough time for me to mention so many guys, but it was, I think it was one of the classic periods of basketball during that time.
So past basketball, you've had a legal career. What made you want to pursue that?
I had always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was growing up as a kid in Brooklyn, New York. I was a child of television, but also was living during a period of time of the civil rights movement, as well as the war in Vietnam protests. And I always thought that being a lawyer would be in the forefront of change, change for the better. And I thought that after watching so much television, Perry Mason and the Defenders and TV shows like that, where they were the voice for the voiceless and gave power to the powerless. I thought that being a lawyer could put me in the parade as opposed to being on the sidelines watching. And I was able to kind of affect some of those dreams when I graduated from law school and became a prosecutor in New York City. Hopefully protecting the community that I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, being able to have some impact on how justice was meted out. And going forward as a lawyer in private practice and doing other things that kind of were offshoots of the law, hopefully, I was prepared to try and do the right thing, to be an activist in a way that, kind of had some impact on social justice.
And so you attended Harvard Law School, a very iconic school. What makes Harvard Law School unique?
Honestly, you'd have to say that by measurements, certainly the people who teach the law school, as well as those who have been chosen to go to law school. I mean, I can speak to a number of my classmates right now who are in public service, but certainly there are a lot of folks who are in private practice right now that have profound impact, a lot of them very positive impact on society. To say that Harvard Law School is unique, obviously the selectivity, but it's the only law school I ever attended, so I really can't say by comparison what it was to Yale, to Stanford, to some of the other, to Columbia, and some of the other great law schools. I just know that I received an awful lot from that law school with regard to training, with regard to philosophy, with regard to friends, and some recognition as well. So you combine all that, and I'm very proud to have graduated from there and have been trained by them.
And so you talked about, wanting to make a positive change. What role does athletics play in social justice?
Well, I think today more than ever, it's athletics teaches obviously leadership, in my opinion. And when you teach leadership, principle, and ethics, which I think sports has a huge role to play there, that those who have been able to participate in sports have kind of a leg up on understanding exactly what that means, and also from the standpoint of being able to work cooperatively, to be able to collaborate with people from different backgrounds. I think that's another training ground that sports offers. But today, sports is so tightly woven in our social fabric that people look to sports to provide leadership, to provide guidance, and also to provide inspiration. And it's important for athletes to recognize that the platforms that they stand on right now, based upon all that I just described, that there's a duty to be able to speak out, to be able to use that platform in a positive manner to focus on what's certainly needed in America today, which is a social justice effort. We know that that's been lacking throughout our history in America, and now people are starting to become aware. But we also, in such a divisive world, have to recognize that there are sides that you have to be able to take. And I think athletes, because of their stature, have an opportunity to stand for right, stand for principle, and to be able to pass that on, particularly to young people.
If there was one thing that you could teach today's youth, what would that be?
I think the most important thing is to realize who you are, and to really focus on being the best person that you can possibly be. And what that entails are the things that I talked about: principles, ethics, how you treat other human beings. I think those things are so important. But in doing so, just recognize again that your inherent goodness is what needs to come out more than anything else. Don't try to be like anyone else, but try to be yourself with those principles in mind.
Okay, and as it relates to athletics, what advice do you have for young athletes?
It depends on how young. I would say that if you're just starting out, I would try and play as many sports as I possibly could. Obviously that you develop certain skills in different skills in certain sports, and I would say that you work on becoming, the best athlete that you can possibly be before you start to specialize. I think all too often you have young people who specialize and develop, muscle training in one sport, and ultimately, it doesn't work for other sports. And more than anything else, I think that the idea is to have fun in what you're doing and develop the totality of physical capabilities. And in doing so, you're also developing a mental edge that certainly will serve you well going beyond your playing career. And when I talk about playing careers, I'm not talking about professional sports, because obviously you look at all the individual sports and you're talking about 1 to 2% of young people who pursue those sports ultimately become professionals. But sports becomes a great opportunity to pursue an education, to be able to develop those principles and those ethics and virtues that I spoke of earlier, whether it's perseverance, whether it's a work ethic, whether it's the ability to work with other people. All those things you find in sports. So I think participation in sports is extremely important. And in order to be the best that you can be, I would start out playing a number of different sports and ultimately gravitate towards the one I like, and obviously give it your best.
So you've obviously had a great broadcasting career as well. What have been some of your favorite venues and college towns to visit?
I really enjoyed when I was doing ACC games, because I was a part of the ACC back in the day. And so, when you talk about venues, obviously before it was torn down, so to speak, or actually refitted, retrofitted. The Cole Fieldhouse at the University of Maryland, my alma mater, was one of the great places. Obviously, the Dean Smith Center, I felt was extremely wonderful to go and visit. I mean, I guess you could say, all of the ACC venues. And now having an opportunity to go around the country, I've been to Rupp Arena, I've been to Pauley Pavilion. I actually played against UCLA back in the day there. Any number of those, and now in the Big Ten, we look at Chrysler Arena and some of the other Big Ten venues. It's just been fun to get the atmosphere, not just the structure, but the atmosphere with the fans, etc. It's been a wonderful opportunity.
So arguably the most iconic game that you've called is the 1992 Duke Kentucky game, which we all know. What do you remember most about that game?
Well, I obviously remember Leitner's shot, which was, kind of a sudden death shot, and that's why I think people remember it more than anything else. But I thought that game highlighted the future of basketball. You had, guys like Grant Hill, Jamal Mashburn, Christian Laettner, among others, who, demonstrated a versatility that went beyond stereotyping them based on size. I mean, you had Jamal Mashburn at 6'8", 6'9", and Laettner at 6'10", able to shoot the ball from outside. Able to Mashburn, Grant Hill, able to handle the ball, play like guards, rebound like front line players, and to play with a kind of an emotion that people envy to a great extent, play with a passion that people envy. And I thought they were the forerunners of many of today's players who have demonstrated all of those virtues that I spoke of. That's the thing that I remember most about that game, that, these are great players that are demonstrating that there's more to, just stereotyping big guys have to stay on the block, and younger, or not younger, but smaller players have to play on the perimeter. That, these guys had a versatility that was, going to be the norm rather than the exception going forward.
Okay, my final question for you. It's a huge debate right now, and I like to ask all of my guests this: where do you stand on the Jordan versus LeBron debate?
I'm not saying it's the punt, Caegan. I don't. Two different eras, two different players. Obviously, highly skilled. Could Michael Jordan play in this era? Absolutely. Could LeBron James play in Michael Jordan's era? Absolutely. I don't see why people. I guess people who like to argue and like to debate, which I used to, can do that forever. But right now, I just see them in different eras, and I see the greatness. And I don't know why we have to choose. Sorry.
Okay, well, how about this? If LeBron wins we'll say two more championships, is it overwhelming at that point? Is he the undisputed GOAT at that point?
No, I don't measure greatness by winning championships.
Okay.
Quite honestly, because there are guys who have 4 and 5 rings that play 5 minutes a game that are out there. You have to measure it by their impact on the game. That's just coming from somebody who's played with some great players who never really won a ring. But if they were on teams that were outfitted to win, they certainly would have won some championships as well. So I don't measure greatness simply by who won the most championships.
Okay, so if you measure greatness by their impact on the game, who are some of the guys that you think fit that category as far as impact goes?
Taking away from the fact that they didn't win a championship, the obvious ones are Charles Barkley's of the world, Tracy McGrady's back in my day. I would say a guy like George McGinnis, who's a great player, Artis Gilmore, who was a great player. These guys never won NBA championships. Artis Gilmore won an ABA championship, and so did George McGinnis. But when we talk about NBA stuff, those are guys who are great players, never won championships, but had they been on teams that were structured to win championships, they certainly deserve to be spoken of in that same sense.
Okay, well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. It's been an honor talking to you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Another great episode today here at Somehow We Manage with Mr. Len Elmore, sharing lots of great stories from not only his playing career, but from his legal career and his broadcasting career. Folks, if you liked what you heard today, as always, be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We're on all social media outlets. Give us a follow. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A huge shout out to Mr. JR Quitman today, helping us out producing the podcast. But as always, thank you very much for watching. We are very appreciative of those who join with us, continue to grow with us on this journey. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.